Welcome back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self-acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories, along with practical tools and actionable insights that can guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. Her name is Kristen. She is an empath, nature lover, and fur mama to two dog and two cats. She's a proud daughter of refugees, endometriosis warrior, and intergenerational cycle breaker. She is a therapist and trauma conscious embodiment coach who works with women to find their inner power to live a life on their own terms. Her mission is to help women heal their deep wounds, face their fears, and shed layers of societal conditioning and break cycles of ancestral trauma. She loves working with women who are going through their fertility journeys like herself to heal and find more peace and embody empowerment and joy. Her approach is deeply rooted in the belief that you are not broken and that your pain is not a pathology. You are the powerful portal to your own healing. So, without further ado, I want to welcome Kristen onto the podcast. Kristen, welcome to the Power Grief Journey.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Likewise. So I remember talking to you earlier this month before we recorded, and I remember you had a powerful story, and I'm going to let you share that here in a second. But I just want to say I'm excited for you to be on the podcast today and share your grief story and your healing journey because you've got a powerful gift to give back to others in this space. So without further ado, I want to give you a little bit of time to share that story with us and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so my story is something that's actually still continuing, but it has started about 3.5 years ago when my husband and I started trying for a baby. And after a year of trying unsuccessfully, we were told to go to a fertility clinic, and we went there and went through three failed IUIs, three failed egg retrievals, with the exception of a low level mosaic embryo. And if anyone who's in that space knows, it's a uh, embryo that has some abnormal cells, some normal cells. And that journey is very difficult. I went through a lot of painful medications, and I also discovered that I had stage 4 endometriosis and adenomyosis. And after going through that, we decided to take a break and try naturally again. And during that time, my husband and I experienced a miscarriage. Um, and from there, we are trying to go back to a fertility clinic. So, trying to kind of keep it a little bit short. We've had a few years that have been quite difficult, physically and emotionally, in many ways. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing a little bit more about your story. And I first off want to say that I'm very sorry about finding out about having endometriosis. My wife had that as a teenager. And also on top of that, having a miscarriage. That's a lot to go through. And I think that in the spaces I've learned on the infertility journey, from my perspective, being there with my wife, talking about miscarriages, talking about infertility is still something today that is not very well known about, let alone discussed in society, and for lack of a better term, accepted in a sense. We have this ideology of things about, well, it's easy to have kids. You just get married, you have kids, life goes on. And what I've come to find on my journey, just as you have found out, that infertility is not all that uncommon. It's very, very common. And so is having miscarriages. So it's something that I'm excited to have you on the podcast today because I've found out raising awareness about this is helping people better understand that this doesn't have to be a taboo topic that we don't discuss or something that we think is a rare and an oddity. It is very common and it's something that needs to be studied more and discussed more.
Yeah, I I completely agree. Even coming on this podcast can be a little bit difficult for me, right? Because of, um, who's gonna hear it sometimes is a thing that comes up in your mind and feeling that shame. And at the same time, right, I remind myself that, you know what, there's also so many people, as you said, who have gone through this or are going through this, that this can serve to be really helpful for, and also a motivator for them to be more open about what they're going through. So, yeah, I feel as I'm here, I feel that stigma. I feel that, right? And at the same time, I also realize like you need to move through that and make it more visible. And it'll be, much more helpful for others and myself included.
Yeah, I'll share with you. I talked to a doctor last week, Brenna Squires. Her episode will come out here in July, but she has struggled with infertility for over, I think it's 7 or 8 years now, if I remember right.
Mm,
And she's trying to raise awareness just like you. And she talked about how there are stigmas and stereotypes in society, and it's this uncomfortable feeling as a woman to like not want to talk about it because people don't understand it or they don't want to understand it. Um, and so trying to break through those barriers, which is what she came on my podcast to do, was to have a voice and raise awareness. And so I was very happy to give her and give you the space to come on here and share your journey through infertility. I can't imagine what it was like, by the way, to go through, IUDs that failed and, infertility drugs that were causing pain. What was it like for you when you started getting into that process, trying to understand if there were things you could use, medications and treatments to stimulate fertility to happen? What was that process like for you initially? Was it apprehensive and, maybe felt uncertain at times, or did it give you a sense of hope when you talked to your doctors?
mm. Yeah, I would say it's a lot of mixed feelings, and it definitely evolved over time too. Um, in the beginning, there was a part of me that was excited starting, fertility treatments, because in my head I thought like it'll happen. Like it just no one has a problem. You just do IVF and you'll have a baby. You'll do IUI and you'll have a baby. Okay, maybe like the first two rounds of IUI won't work, but it'll work out. And then there was another part of me that was so scared. I had never been through an experience like this where you have to take all of these injections in your body, and you're doing blood tests like almost on a daily basis. You're doing ultrasounds on almost on a daily basis. And it's just a very invasive and intense process. And, initially I thought that I thought I could handle it, knowing that, I'm just gonna have a baby. Like I'll just go through this, I'll have a baby. And that's not how it turned out. And what I noticed as I moved further and further through fertility treatments was that my body, my nervous system actually started shifting into like a freeze state, a survival response of being so in fear of going through this process. And I noticed myself, I just like had no energy to do any kind of work, to hang out with people, like isolating myself, um, just wanting to sleep all the time. So that was really difficult for me. And even as I'm approaching going back to a fertility clinic, luckily I've learned some tools to work with my nervous system to help me prepare. I still can feel myself, my body kind of wanting to shift into that place of like freezing, of sort of paralysis. So yeah, it's shifted over time, and it's been a diversity of feelings. Yeah.
And when you look back at where you started this journey and where you are today, what are some parts of yourself that you feel have changed on a deep level, or what are some things that you've learned along the way?
Mm. Oh gosh, I would say a lot. Um, Probably one of the most important things that have shifted for me. And I always, whenever I share my story, I always invite people to do the same. Is initially, I would not feel my feelings. And instead, I would push it down and I would hear messages of stay positive, attitude is everything. And I felt shame and guilt for being so sad. And when I just kind of realized that I need to give myself the space to feel the anger, the sadness, the grief, the whatever was emerging in me. And by allowing myself to do that, I actually felt like I was starting to heal a little bit. The suffering was a little less intense. And it gave space for me to feel other things like moments of joy, moments of gratitude. So I would definitely say that that has shifted this, numbness, trying to be positive, I guess, the toxic positivity to actually feeling. Um, what's happening with me, what wants to move through me would be one of the biggest shifts. um yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up because what I share on my podcast a lot is that when you have a lot of blame and shame and guilt for that matter, it's really repressing a lot of emotions inside you. And
Yeah.
I always tell people that it's a lot like if you've ever watched a Chinese ping pong tournament, how fast that ball moves across the table. Your emotions, when you repress them, do that same thing inside you, and they actually start causing problems. And they'll manifest as physical pain or they'll manifest as a psychological pain because you're not letting yourself feel that emotion. You're not letting yourself say, I recognize this emotion, I see it, I feel it, I hear it, I understand it. And I love that you brought that up because society makes us feel those things of guilt and shame for sitting in our grief, or even, um, when we go through infertility. I don't know how many times you've probably heard this, but I've heard a lot that, well, just don't think about it, it'll happen. Oh, well, it'll
Yeah.
happen in the right time. Oh, well, you're just
Yeah.
focusing too much on that. Society
Hmm.
is very quick to write us off when we go through these things, especially with infertility. They're quick to write it off because the expectation is that it's just going to happen. So let go of that. Don't worry about it. And as I've come to find, I've interviewed 78 people on my podcast. Not a single one of them is emotionally detached from a grief situation. Not a single one. And so it's really important, I think, to, as you said, feel those emotions. Let them, they're messages. They're trying to tell you something. And so if we hold space for those emotions to feel them and process them and understand them, they don't become so overbearing and overburdening on ourselves. They actually become things we can move through that are going to teach us and guide us on the next step of our journey.
Mm. Yeah. And just to add to what you were saying, the messages that we get from others um can, in a way, I know that it can be well intended from other people. They're trying to help, and at the same time, um, it's a invalidation of our experience, and it's sometimes putting the blame on us for our circumstances. If only you were less stressed and you stopped worrying, then it will. So um yeah, there's sort of that other element of stigma as well. Just not even being able to talk about it, but when people do, the way that they see it as kind of your fault, and not allowing your experience to be your experience.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up that word invalidation of feelings because that's really what that is. It's a very, and it's got to be hard. I'm not a woman, so I can't speak for this, but I've heard it from other women that I've talked to in the infertility world. Is this that every month that doesn't happen, it's a constant reminder. And I've heard women describe this as my body let me down, or my body's not willing
Mm,
to do what it should be doing. And there's a lot of guilt and a lot of blame and a lot of shame around that because it turns into this mindset of there's something wrong with me that needs to be fixed, or there's something wrong with me that I can't fix. And that couldn't be further than from the truth in my eyes. It could be further from that. And I say that just because it's not happening doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, but we got to figure out, what is going on and what are some things and some treatments or maybe some natural supplements or whatever it may be that gets worked up with a doctor who's willing to listen and hold space for you. Figuring out what some of those solutions might be. Um, I've talked to women, by the way, who just can't get pregnant. Their body just does not want to do it. And that's really sad and it's really unfortunate, but it's also very hurtful for them, by the way, because people don't hold space for them. They just kind of go, okay, well, that's uncomfortable. I don't really want to talk about that. I'm not sure how to respond to that. Um, and I think it's just a matter, like you said, of validating where somebody's at in this journey and just giving them space to process how they feel.
yeah, yeah. It's when you hear those messages, you can internalize them and you sort of measure your worth in a way of that. The experience you shared is the same as me, um and every month that my cycle starts, I feel like, oh, it's because I'm diseased. I have endometriosis, I'm diseased. My, you know, body's just like sick. It's just like these different thoughts that these hurtful thoughts that you have towards yourself, come up, you internalize all of these things. And um, it's not even the truth. So, yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, what's it been like between you and your partner as you guys have walked through this infertility journey? Because I know that a lot of times, and I learned this when I got pregnant with my son, that men are oftentimes just told to like sit on the sideline or they don't want to participate
Mm.
in the process very much. And I've come to find that while that is partially true, I don't say it's always true, but it's partially true. The other half is men also experience grief in that capacity too. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit, whatever you're comfortable with. What's this journey been like for you and your partner as you've walked it together?
Yeah. So I would say our relationship has evolved throughout this journey. Initially I was thinking that, because I'm the woman and I'm physically going through all of uh this experience, and my husband also, he said that he's actually okay to not have children. So I was always of the mindset that, I was the one who was really being the most impacted by this. But it wasn't, you know, but through, communication with my husband, did I realize that this was negatively impacting him as well. And I even saw him diminish how he felt, because I think he took on that same mindset of, I'm not a woman, so I shouldn't be feeling as upset, right? Like, um and I felt like, you know what, that's actually not really fair. You're going, yes, I'm going through a lot of like the physical labor of this journey, but he's going through a lot emotionally as well. Um so I think that was really wonderful that we just being in communication with each other and working as a team, I was able to really learn how he was feeling and shift my mindset about how significant this journey has been for him and how painful this journey has been for him. And I think that's allowed him to be a lot more open and expressive about what he's going through, allowing both of our mindsets to change. Um, and another piece about our relationship, um, that has remained the same and I think has been just so helpful is that we truly do view ourselves as a team. So when especially when I'm going through fertility treatments and they hit me really hard because when you have endometriosis, the fertility treatments actually exacerbate it. So my pain levels increase. Um, I'm exhausted. I'm really hit hard by these medications. And so we kind of have a deal where while I'm going through that process, he's the one who cooks dinner at night, you know. Um, and what we usually would do is we rotate, but if I'm just feeling like really crappy, like he's gonna cook dinner that week, that's sort of his sacrifice while I'm sacrificing my body through all these medications. So that's just an example of how we've, worked together as a team, which I feel like has been such a rock through this, journey together.
I really love that you said you guys came together as a team. I really love that. I think that's one of the
Mhm.
biggest important things I learned through that process is that you've got to be a team together in this, and that it's not just one
Mhm.
person or the other, because it does take both of us to make that process happen. And Uh, sometimes we find out in infertility, by the way, sometimes it's the woman, sometimes it's the man, sometimes it's both.
Yeah.
But there's always something that each person can do better and contribute more in that process. And I love that outside of fertility treatments, your husband's stepping up and cooking dinner and helping you out when those medications are exacerbating the pain with endometriosis. I do know that as my wife had endometriosis, it does affect a lot of the reproductive system and it can create
Yeah.
sensitivities and issues with the egg being released. It can put pressure on the ovaries. It can do a lot of things there that put up roadblocks for the natural process to happen. So I'm really happy to hear that he's been so supportive with you.
Yeah, no, he's really great. And yeah, I'm honestly really thankful. I just I have so much gratitude and it also makes me it affirms even more our ability to be really good parents, because we're going through such a difficult like a really difficult time. Not even just the emotional, the physical, but this is the financial element of this is insanity. Like we like full transparency, we are in so much debt because of this, right? And regardless of these circumstances, we have been able to remain really strong. And so it makes me feel like we're pretty unstoppable. So it's a good, affirming, you know, kind of situation. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about the doctor side of things because I know going through infertility, there's many different outlets you can choose. You can choose naturopath doctors, you can choose a normal situation through healthcare, you can go to IVF or reproductive specialists through this process. What's that experience been like as you've gone through working with doctors? And have they made you feel confident in the process? Did they explain things well to you about what these drugs were like and what the process is going to be like for you? Well, what was that experience like?
Oh man. um whew, it's been difficult. But at the same time, I have been able to find really great doctors and other health professionals. So the first fertility clinic that we went to, which I will not name, but they're a huge, brand name fertility clinic, and um, the treatment that was provided there was not at all customized, to um, me, to my endometriosis, to, all the things that I needed. I truly just felt like a number there. There were so many balls dropped. There was a medication that my husband wasn't supposed to be taking that actually was interfering with the whole process. But we were told about it 3 IUIs in. So we spent thousands
Mm.
and thousands of dollars, and the treatment was basically for nothing, because of their uh, inability to catch that with a simple question of what medication are you on, you know? Um, and so from that experience, I had to be such an advocate for myself and do so much research. And I started exploring doing more natural, holistic types of treatments. So I did join, a natural fertility program, which changed, my diet, supplements, different things with my lifestyle, reducing toxins, things like that. And that definitely, I think, has been probably the most positive um, experience that I've had with health professionals, going, the natural route in terms of at least just making me healthy as, like a healthy person overall. Um, but just, with that, it unfortunately, we still haven't been able to have a child. So we are returning back to fertility treatments, and this new clinic we're actually feeling more positive about. They just took the time to answer all of my questions, and they were very specific with their recommended protocol based off of, my diagnoses. And the testing was also really thorough in terms of, seeing like what else, getting to the root cause, right, of what's going on. And also being on the note of incorporating my diagnoses, like actually caring about how it impacts my health, because fertility medications exacerbate endometriosis. You know, they were talking about how what they could do so that the treatment could be effective, but also not make me as sick. So I really appreciated that. So it really depends on the professional, and you really have to be your own advocate ultimately. Yeah.
What advice would you give to women that are going through infertility, that are maybe starting that journey of thinking about going to an infertility clinic or going to a doctor? What kind of things would you share with them? Maybe questions or, ideas to consider, or, questions to ask a doctor.
Hmm. One thing is shop around until you find somebody who you trust, who takes the time to listen to you, who can um who will do tests to look at other root causes of, why you're unable to have a child at that point in time. um I think that's just so important. I felt like I didn't want to shop around because it was going to take too much time, because booking an appointment with a fertility clinic, like you might have to wait 3 months, or more to see the person that, you're interested in seeing. But from my perspective, I think it's well worth it, because if you end up just going with someone because it's the most convenient, it's the fastest, um, you might be thousands of dollars deep in debt for nothing, you know. Um, that's one thing. I would say another is it sucks because we already have so much on our plate. Like, you wish that the medical professionals would be able to answer everything for you, but do your research. Really do your research, especially if you have a disease like endometriosis. I really encourage you to look up what are some protocols that people have used. I also encourage you to check out like Facebook support groups and ask people who have similar, diagnoses to you, or experiences as you, who they recommend and who they've had great experiences. That's also a great way. Um, yeah.
I love that. I think that's very important to try to vet people that you're going to be using their services, like doctors and infertility clinics, because I have noticed in my own journey that recently my wife went back to a clinic and they prescribed her a medicine that interacts really poorly with her asthma. It could actually cause a larger health problem. And to your point, when you said that you guys spent thousands of dollars on this treatment and then they could have simply asked, what medication were you taking? Um,
Yeah.
you know, I told my wife really quickly because we had to research this on our own when she came back because the pharmacist didn't really say anything about whether or not it was bad to mix with the asthma treatment. And long story short, those two drugs interact very, very poorly and can cause a bronchospasm, meaning that you can literally stop breathing from these things. Um, and so we reached out to the doctor office to check on these things, and it's been over a month, no response. And so, to your point, what you shared today, Kristen, I think is very powerful. Vet your doctors, ask them questions, ask them the hard questions, because if that doctor is going to drop the ball in those capacities, we end up losing lots of money, let alone our own health. And we all might end up in a worse off health situation than we initially started this process with.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what happened to me. My endometriosis got so bad from that first clinic. I ended up having to get surgery. Um, and healing from that's a whole nother thing. So yeah, oof, really vet those doctors and don't be afraid to ask questions. And yeah, unfortunately, we got to do our research. We just, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the really hard, challenging part today. When I was talking to Brenna last week about infertility, she said there's so many outlets right now for infertility treatments, and a lot of it can come back to, by the way, how you take care of yourself. And that can be whether you exercise, eat right, eat clean. Maybe you find out what supplements you actually need versus taking just a generic thing someone told you to. When doctors give you results back and say, oh, everything's normal, you might be normal in a sense of, they did a study of 5,000 people to figure out what normal is, but normal is it's a word we don't really like in this industry because every woman's body's different, every single one. Every man is different, by the way. And so to really use the word normal to describe, if we're in a fine place or not is really not a very good indicator of if we're okay or not, or if there's something we can do or need to do. So I would love to see the medical industry shift away from words like normal or in the range of things because it's just not a very good scoping indicator of where we stand in these processes. And to your point, I encourage people who are going through infertility, Google sadly is going to be your best friend because your doctors are not going to tell you half of
Yeah.
what you need to know. And so I do feel like in a lot of ways you have to research these things. You have to go to a doctor, do all that stuff, then you got to come home and you got to say, okay, what's this word mean, or what's this condition mean, or what are these things I can take, or how does this drug interact with X? And it's a lot of work, like you said, when you're working a full-time job and you're trying to deal with this, and you're also at the same time trying to process grief of infertility, you're trying to process your emotions with it, trying to process how your body's going to go through this. Like you said about having medications that exacerbate endometriosis. Now you're dealing with that on top of all this other stuff going on. It can be very overwhelming and be a lot.
Oh, yeah, it's certainly not an easy journey. I mean, I don't know if I know anybody who's gone through it and has called it easy. Um, but yeah, it's definitely not an easy journey. And I think something that's really important is to take care of yourself as you go through that journey. And, that might mean, stronger boundaries with, certain places that you go. Like if you're feeling exhausted, instead of going out to dinner or, you know, that baby shower, maybe you should actually stay home and relax or take a walk in nature. Um, so I think creating carving out that space and creating those boundaries to support the carving out of that space is helpful in making it a little bit more manageable. Um, and in a way, when you're able to, when you do that research and stay on top of things, it can be empowering, right? It can be empowering to be able to help to navigate, but with balance, right? We don't want to go so crazy that we are just, we can't control everything, you know? So it's just really important to create the space for yourself to heal and to rest, and find joy in those small ways, even though, it might be hard. Um, but yeah, just really taking care of yourself.
I think that's a big factor that can make life just a little bit easier as you navigate this.
Yeah.
And you're right, by the way. I've never heard of a single person going through infertility treatments or going to doctors for that ever say it's easy. I've never heard a single person say that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's as much as it's a body health side of things, if you will, it's a very strong mental game as well to try to keep
Hmm.
yourself in that place of you mentioned this earlier, toxic positivity. I was glad you brought that up because I've learned a lot that our world and our society kind of lives on toxic positivity. We live in this like,
Yeah.
well, you guys got to stay positive. Well, you just got to be happy all the time. And I go, if life was all, candy and rainbow unicorn and glitter, we wouldn't have problems. We wouldn't be in these struggles of things that we are. But the reality is that life is hard and it throws challenges at us that sometimes we're not really prepared to handle, or we just don't know how to handle it for that matter. And that means that our happiness is going to be sacrificed for a little bit while we figure out how
Yeah.
to navigate that. And instead of shaming people for that or blaming them or using toxic positivity over those things, is just sit with it and hold space with it for a minute. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you need to be fixed. It doesn't mean there's a problem with you. It just means that you're now facing a new challenge in life, something you haven't experienced before. And when you're
Yeah.
in that place, the best thing you can do is hold space for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, that is, anger, sadness, happiness, joy, all of these emotions are, if you're feeling it, it means you're alive. That is life, is to feel all of these different things. And one is not better than the other. One is not negative, one is not positive. It's it's just our body's way of communicating to ourselves, and yeah, it is difficult. It is difficult to sit with anger or sadness and grief, right? It's for a lot of people, it's a discomforting and uncomfortable sensation and feeling. But when we're able to kind of shift how we, look at it and see it as like, okay, this is here to either move through me or tell me something, it it becomes easier. And the more that you can allow yourself to feel sadness, the more you can feel that joy. Your capacity to hold and feel one thing allows you to feel another thing. So it's like the colors, just the colors of life.
You're reminding me of a movie that my wife made me watch. It's a Disney movie. I think it's called Inside Out, if I remember right. But it's all these little
I see.
colored marbles, if you will, I think is how I can phrase that. And they're one of them's angry, one of them's sad, one of them's happy. There's all these different emotions in the character scheme of things. And what I thought was funny about the movie is that the very happy, positive one almost like wouldn't let anger and wouldn't let sadness come out basically most of the
Mm,
movie. And I think it was such a powerful movie because I try to share it with people who live in that toxic positivity world to say that
mm,
those emotions, sadness and anger, by the way, they hold a lot of power for us. They're not things to be suppressed or pushed aside, that they're a problem or they're wrong or they're bad. It doesn't mean those things. They're really pointing to different avenues in your body to understand yourself. And,
yeah.
uh, I learned when I lost my son to stillbirth, I learned my anger that was coming out of that was I had a lot of love for a child I got to meet. That's what anger was. It wasn't some bad
Yeah.
negative thing. It was love with nowhere to go, and it was stronger than I was at that
Yeah.
point. And so
Mm,
when you're able to give yourself that space just to say, I'm angry today. It's not fun. I don't like it. It's not where I want to be. But what is it telling me? What's it trying to show me right now? What do I need to listen to? Is there something I need to learn right now? Or is there a part of me I'm not giving space to today? And, giving
mhm,
yourself, asking yourself powerful questions to understand yourself is a better way I like to phrase that. Um,
mm.
Kristen, I wanted to ask you as we're getting close to the end of the podcast here, has your expertise as being a therapist and a trauma conscious embodiment coach helped you navigate this journey of infertility?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting, because as I was um, getting my certification for embodiment coaching, I was going through this, journey. And it was like a blessing that it just coincided. And I felt like everything I learned from that program was just like the tools that I needed to get me through this. And which I still use to get me, through this journey. And a lot of it is very similar to what I've been sharing with you, like being able to sit with and process the emotions that are coming up, and listening to them. Like literally what we've just been saying, is such a pivotal thing with uh what I learned in embodiment coaching. Um, And another is interesting. Now this is separate from the toxic positivity. Um, but what it is having a sense of hope and an orientation towards what you desire. So if you're desiring to be a mother, um, what I do is I've bought books for, children's books, like I see it and I'm like, oh my God, that would be so sweet. And instead of denying, buying that book and, there's a part of you that feels like, okay, like, wow, that would be utter rejection if I could never have a child and I bought all these books, right? But there's that other part of me that's like, like just it's okay to believe too. It's okay to have hope too, you know? So just so I buy baby books and sometimes I imagine like when I'm like walking my dog that oh yeah, I'm just imagining myself being pregnant while I'm walking with my dog and it just like feels really nice. So just allowing, I guess just being in that feeling of being a mother. Um and and it feels good and it feels like it just brings a little bit more hope for myself, which I feel like is separate from that toxic positivity. It's just more of tapping into being in the frequency of something that I truly desire. Yeah, so I would say those are some of the tools that I've used from embodiment that have helped.
I really love that for you because I think there's a big difference between I'll call it natural positivity of life and toxic
Mhm.
positivity. And I think the big difference I've learned and what I coach people on is there's situations in life where you're pushing and forcing something to happen, and that's
Yeah,
where it will break and fall apart very, very fast because it's not built in alignment of who you are. When you were talking about buying baby books, I love that, by the way. I think that's an awesome thing
Mhm.
because that's in alignment with your goal. It's in alignment with who you are and where you feel your emotional base. It's in alignment of those things. And when you live over there, by the way, it's not forced, it's not pushed. It actually just comes to you and it's natural. And I think that's where, as far as positivity goes, I think that's the helpful side of positivity. That's where it can really do something wonderful for you in your life.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. I think there's definitely a distinction of I like the words that you use, natural and alignment. I think that's very fitting where it's something that is emerging um from my soul, from my true self, that hope, that desire that's coming through. It's not emerging because I feel forced to feel happy. I feel forced to you know, thinking that if I buy this book magically, I'll have a child. It just feels very natural. Um, and yeah, just a natural hope. Yeah.
I want you to hold on to that hope, by the way. That's that's something I'm still holding on to quite a bit since losing my kid,
Mm,
but it's the thing that will
yeah.
keep you, it'll keep you going, and it's not to say, by the way, you will not have hard days, you will. But it's something there that will help you through those moments. So I just want to encourage you to hold on to that as you navigate the journey. Um, Kristen, I just want to say thank you so much for being a guest on today's podcast. This has been a real honor to hear your story and hear about your journey and everything that you have actually shared about that. Because I think that, like I said, infertility is a very still under talked about, kind of a closed off taboo topic that people are still not being open enough with to discussing that it is actually very common. And it's something that we need to really learn more about, understand a little more fully, and hold space for people on that journey like you and me. Because there are other people out there like us that are going through it. And to give them, for you to come on this show today and share your story is not just going to give them hope, but it's going to inspire them that they're not alone, that they don't have to go through this by themselves, that there's other people out there that are experiencing it and going through it, and that that sense of community can help them navigate that journey just a little bit easier. So I just want to say thank you to you today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having your platform, your podcast, allowing people to share their stories, and it helps create a network of people who are going through really similar things. And if there's, anybody out there who wants to talk to me, like if you're going through a similar thing, a similar journey as me, I would love to speak to you. Feel free to reach out. Um, yeah.
So, Kristen, since you brought that up, if people are listening to this podcast episode and they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's www.Kristen, KRISTEN CORDERO.com, which I don't know if will be in the show notes, but you can reach me there. And you can also book a free call with me. I also shared a link where you can, connect with me for free, of course, just to chat. Um, so that you can reach me that way.
I love that. And for listeners today, Kristen's website link will be in the show notes. So you guys, when you get done listening to this episode, you can reach out to her there. I would encourage you guys to talk to her if you are in that world of infertility and just feeling lost or feeling in that area of hopelessness, because that does happen. I've been there myself with my wife many times, and it helps to reach out to somebody like Kristen to talk. It really does. It's a person that is going to be safe for you to express yourself the way you need to. Somebody can be a listening ear, but also somebody that can help you navigate that journey a little bit easier. So I want to encourage you guys to reach out to her. Kristen, before we wrap up, what is one thing you would share with listeners today who are going through grief or maybe feel stuck in grief? What would you share with them that they could use to navigate that just a little bit easier?
Mm, okay. One thing. Um, well, I just want to share to remember that you are not broken. Your pain is not a pathology. You are just going through a really hard time. And it's okay to feel those ways. Feel the anger, feel the sadness, and to have compassion for when it comes up. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
I I love that. That's exactly what I teach people in my own coaching practice. And to be very fair, what you just said is exactly what most people need to hear. And for
Mm,
listeners that just heard what Kristen shared, by the way, that is one of the most real things you can do in your grief. It's okay to be with it. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You're not a problem. Nothing wrong with you. You're going through something very, very hard. And to be kind and compassionate to yourself is one of the best things you can do. So, Christian, thank you for sharing that with us today.
Yeah, no, thank you again. I hope everything that I shared was helpful for at least one person.
I definitely know that it will be. And I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Kristen and I today on this episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If you guys found this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Kristen's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You guys can find us on Apple and Spotify. The Empowered Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.